For those of you who haven't met before, there we go, recording started. For those of you who haven't met before, my name is Craig McCoy. I'm the chair of London HR Connection, which is a role I've held for the last 8 years or so. I'm also a senior HR director with around 35 years experience in the profession and a fellow of the CIPD. I've held 16 HR director roles in different organisations, both as a permanent and as an interim. I'm currently the interim HR director at St John Ambulance. A few words about London HR Connection. We're a long-established professional networking group for everyone with an interest in the world of HR. Originally established back in the 1980s, our origins were within the CIPD, and we remain affiliated to the CIPD, but have an independent board, which I chair, consisting of 9 senior HR professionals. In normal times, if you remember those, pre-COVID, we are well known for our live events, and obviously during the time of the pandemic, we've adapted, like most organisations, and run webinars these days, although we plan to return to live events also from May, so watch this space. And we're a not-for-profit organisation. Our model is based on commercial sponsorship, and you can see that the slide in front of you shows our current annual sponsors drawn from various sectors across the HR and academic industry. So I'd now like to introduce our speaker panel, and our speakers for this event are from a new consultancy called CEO Whispering, and its principals, David Chapman and Tony Bainbridge, 2 very experienced directors of HR and learning development, very well qualified to advise on the strategic influence of HR leaders at the top table. You know, whether you're an aspiring, new or experienced HR director, there'll be something for you to take away from this session and for further engagement. We're also going to be joined later on by Dan Ellis, who is the People Director for ACAS, who's also been a participant in the CEO Whispering Development Programme and can speak directly about the benefits that he's received from it. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to David. So over to you, David.
Thanks very much, Craig. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks so much to all of you for being here today. So what are we going to focus on today? Well, we're going to take one aspect of our program, and it's this boosting your commercial credibility. So I'm really interested, first of all, just to get your sense of how important it is for you. So we've got a poll coming up. To answer this question, my commercial credibility with my CEO, and when we say CEO, we mean business lead. My commercial credibility with my CEO and the executive team is critical for accomplishing my strategic HR objectives. So we're going to put a poll up to ask you the question, how true is that statement for you personally? Okay, so how true is that statement for you personally? Barely true, somewhat true, fairly true, mostly true, or definitely true? Let's find out what your thoughts are on that. Okay, so as we thought and had hoped, it's at the higher end there. We've got a few more people still to participate, a few more votes coming in. Interesting. So we'll just give you another 5 seconds for you to participate, and then I'll ask Denise to publish the results. Great, let's have the results now if we can, please, Denise. This is what your thinking is there. So definitely at the upper end, which suggests that we're in exactly the right place. So it's pretty critical for you to accomplish your objectives. And this is really the essence of why we wanted to set up this organization and create the program that we've created, because in our experience, we know how important it is. So if that confirms we're all in the right place, which is great, let's think about this. And again, if you can use the chat function for this question that's coming up very shortly, what you think about commercial credibility. The reason why we're focusing on it is when we did our research, we kept on hearing statements like the ones you can see on screen from the people we were doing the research with. For new and aspiring and inexperienced HR directors, they were the statements, similar statements that kept on coming up time after time. So we know this is critical. So let's ask you this question. If you were to define what you think is at the heart of commercial credibility for an HR director, if you put your thoughts in the chat function, let's see what your thinking is on this. What do you believe is the strict definition of commercial credibility? Let's find out what you're saying here. Okay, so it's about delivering on promises from Louisa. What else? What else do you believe is at the heart of commercial credibility? What confers commercial credibility onto an HR director? What other thoughts do we have here? Okay, understanding the business strategy, how HR fits in with this. And that's something that's going to be a key precept that we're going to talk about later, about focusing on the business first and maybe being a people organizational expert second. So what's the clear people strategy? How does it link with that business strategy? How are you serving the business? And that very much speaks to the experience and also I think the mindset that Tony and I both share, and one of the reasons why we set this company up in the first place. So I'm going to pass it over to Tony just to give you a sense of what our business is about and what it is exactly we do. So Tony, over to you.
Thanks, David, and hello, everybody. So we set up CEO Whispering in order to enable you as human resources directors to increase confidence and credibility with the CEO and your executive colleagues in order to create greater commercial impact and, in short, to achieve more of your objectives. As David mentioned in the introduction, we run 2 open programs a year, and the next program is going to be launching on April the 27th, when we will be launching a 4-module program based in UK time. As well as that, we do one-to-one coaching and mentoring, and David will be putting our LinkedIn profiles into the chat. But just to introduce myself briefly, I'm Tony Bainbridge, and I'm probably the only person who's almost had as many HR roles as Craig McCoy over the last 35 years. And I've also spent a number of years running a business, which was a very profitable Novartis subsidiary. And I've seen HR directors who've been successful, and I've also seen those who actually, for some reason, have fallen over. And essentially, what we're looking to do is to help to share your knowledge and experience so that you can be successful. After spending 5 years as Group HR Director at Wilmington PLC, I decided to set up my own consulting business to help companies going through change. And I wanted to give something back to the HR community. I had met David at Wilmington, and I respect him as a great coach for HR leaders. And together we decided to develop this program aimed at the next generation of future HR leaders. David.
So that's Tony. Me, I've been an organizational development expert and executive coach for the last 15 to 20 years. Really at the heart of everything I do is to give my clients an unshakable confidence in the validity of their voice. And what I've found through the last 5 years of focusing a lot on coaching with HR directors is how elusive that feeling of confidence in their validity was. And therefore, I wanted to fix that gap. And also working with Tony in Wilmington, I just had a real deep sense of the value that his skills, his mindset, and his experience can bring. And so I saw it as my job to really distill all of that into learning outcomes for HR directors. So essentially, it's about what the golden rules are. So let's have a look at what we think the golden rules of establishing commercial credibility and boosting them are for you. I'll just find that for you, and I'll let Tony speak to that.
So first of all, it's about enhancing your value to the CEO as their trusted advisor. Secondly, positioning yourself as a business leader first, as well as the people and organization expert. And thirdly, demonstrating your commercial value by using data strategically. So let's move straight to the first golden rule, enhancing your value to the CEO as their trusted advisor. The central aspect of being a trusted advisor is being able to read and add value to the boss. In this case, we're saying that it's the CEO, but it might well be in a larger business, it might well be a divisional director or an operations director, etc. Whoever that CEO person is, David and I have identified the following 6 archetypes of challenging aspects of CEO behaviors. When they're in backup, they're under pressure, they're tired, it's the wrong day of the week. So as we go through the 6 archetypes, we'd appreciate if you could just give some commentary in chat on which of these archetypes you may personally find the most challenging and why. So let's keep the chat function going as we're going through this. The first of the archetypes that I want to mention is the Sphinx. The Sphinx, working with the Sphinx is like getting information or blood from a stone. They say little, they show little emotion, they don't engage. They're dry, they're very technical.
The visionary. So the visionary has incredible ideas that make people think, how on earth are we actually going to make this work? How are we going to get this done?
The pal wants to be everybody's friend, avoids conflict and confrontation, is influenced by the last person they talk to. They're a nice person, but you do tend to get a lot of surprises working with them. The volcano has a lot of mood swings, is quick to lose their temper, and as a result, they transmit pressure downwards, and you really don't want to be the one delivering bad news. Perhaps we no longer have to duck out of the way of the flying coffee cups, but they still are able to lose their temper and lash out to the person in the wrong place at the wrong time.
The intellectual, brain the size of a planet, but pretty much unimpressed by anybody who doesn't have a triple PhD. They're also not the greatest at listening either, because they're always full of cogitation about the brilliance of their own solutions. And finally,
the ditherer, always wanting extra information, even while the apocalypse is looming. They find a reason to wait, just to avoid making decisions. Or, perhaps worse, they get involved in minutiae rather than focusing on the real issues.
So there you are. There are 6 challenging archetypes. If in chat you can tell us which ones that you struggle the most with and why, that would be really useful. I can already see that Sean's got a visionary, excites people in the business, as visionaries often do, because that level of aspiration is so huge, but is also, it's very energizing. Still the issue about how we actually manage to action it. Few intellectuals in the senior management team who won't take any actions. Okay, what else? Have a few problems with PAL, perhaps?
Mm-hmm.
Who else do we struggle with and why? Let's give you another 30, 40 seconds just to give us your thoughts on this. Who do you find the most challenging archetype? And then what we're going to do is we're just going to give you our personal experience and what we found to be the best solutions of dealing with each of these archetypes. Becky struggling with a volcano, you never know where you stand. Also some more problems with volcano. Yes, lots of damage limitations.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just another 20 seconds. Let's see which ones you struggle with the most. I think what we found out, and through the experience of sharing this, that clearly these archetypes resonate with people, that plenty of people have had an experience of these, and it is challenging. The dither obviously being challenging about not taking decisions feels very frustrating. Okay, so these are some of the challenges that HRDs have with the archetypes. What have we found to have been the best opportunity to deal with them? So let's come out of this. And let's start with the Sphinx. Tony, what's your best learning about how to deal with a Sphinx?
Remember, what we're looking to do is to build trust and lessen the impact of the challenging aspects. So as far as the Sphinx is concerned, it's about giving them information, keeping them connected because they're struggling to make those connections. So bring them news from the business, aim to be a conduit, giving them information. and sometimes doing some communicating for them. But be careful of taking this too far.
With a visionary, this is how I see vision. I see vision as a triangle. And we've got one axis of the triangle that's very much about direction. It's very entrepreneurial, very instinct-led. Where are we going to be and when? It's just all about destination. And then there's an axis that's about purpose, the why and the who. But our visionaries are really focusing on the where and the when. What they don't work so well with is the strategy axis, the what and the how. So I found when working with a visionary, if I say I'm going to be the focus on the delivery aspect of turning these great visions into pragmatic plans, and I will be your delivery person. That's the best way I know to deal with the visionary. Tony, how do you deal with a pal?
Well, obviously, the first thing to do is to get close to them, which is what they want. And then once you have built up some trust, you've got a personal connection there, then actually it's a question of using that relationship to point out the consequences of their inaction, or the consequences of the fact that they are just trying to please people and ducking giving information, giving straight them straight. And so in reality, it's about giving them some tough love. On the other hand, moving on to the volcano, it's so important that, first of all, you understand them as an individual, and you start to identify when might be the right time of the day, the right time in the week, when essentially they're in receive mode. And the important thing here is to use 5 words which really can make a difference. And those 5 words are, I owe you the truth. And by actually standing up to them and pointing out exactly what other people are too frightened to, or intimidated to actually say, you're actually giving them real value. And the thing is that with most volcanoes, they've risen through the ranks to be the CEO or the top manager, and they know deep down that they need people to actually speak truth to power. And by saying those words, you'll find that they will respect you in ways that they won't respect anybody else.
I owe you the truth. Okay, let's talk about the intellectual. Sean said it, once you gain respect from an intellectual, it's often easier to get them to move forward. So how do you gain that respect? 3 words, Harvard Business Review. What I've always found is that if I'm going to couch an argument or a proposal to an intellectual, I'm always going to back it up with the most academically sound source I can find. And if I couch my argument or support my argument with that independent academic or intellectual veracity, that's the best way I know to win that trust and credibility with that kind of CEO or business lead. I certainly don't want to get into intellectual antler waving with that person, but what I do want to do is make sure that my sources are impeccably intellectually solid. That's the best way I know to do it. So finally, how do we deal with the ditherer?
Well, needless to say, this is the last one. And the important thing with the ditherer is to lock them down. Give them a concise range of options. When I was a salesperson, we called it the tea or coffee close, right? It's tea time, it's meal break time, so which are you going to take? There's tea or there's coffee, and then point out the implications for each of the different actions that you're presenting to them, and make sure that the options are time bound as well. So it's tea, coffee, by this point, and these are the potential consequences, whichever way you decide to go. So those are the 6 archetypes and the ways that you can start to influence them. Remember that deep down, the CEO will go to the person they trust and they value for advice. You need to be discreet and value adding, giving them something that they hadn't actually thought of for themselves. Remember, deep down, your role is to help them to be a better leader. Back to David.
All right then. So we've asked you how important commercial credibility is to you, what you feel your definition is. Let's get to the $64 million question. How do you perceive your commercial standing with your CEO, or your business lead, and your executive team? So we've not got another poll. If we can have poll number 2, Denise, if you can hit that one up for us. Just a simple measure here. Do you perceive your commercial standing to be low, medium, or high? Let's see how you would assess yourself. Okay, about 50% of the votes in. Interesting. Great for your commercial credibility that nobody's giving themselves a low rating for the moment. Few more seconds. All right then, and let's give you the answers. So in the vast majority, you've said it's medium, which say it's not bad, but it could be better. And I think very much about our program is how can we add at least 2 onto your score? How can we shift your dial up so it's high? And thinking about what's the extra an HRD can achieve with that increased commercial credibility, that increased commercial standing. As I said, it's a key aspect of the program. So there you are. Mostly it's a medium. How can we make it a high? Well, I suppose before we get on to some answers, here's a thought for you. And again, great to get your thoughts on this. What do you perceive the mistakes are that HRDs make that undermine their commercial credibility? In your experience, are the mistakes you've made yourself and the mistakes you've seen around you, what do you believe undermines the commercial credibility for the HRD? Again, have a think about that and put your thoughts in chat. That'd be really useful to us. We'll give you about 30 or 40 seconds to do that and see what comes in. So, what are those mistakes? Okay, so thanks for that, Sean. So lack of understanding of the wider business consequences for HR actions taken. Shying away from being honest. I think that's an interesting one. We've had a lot of people in our research and our experience saying they just didn't feel they had that boldness to speak truth to power, to use Tony's great phrase, I owe you the truth. Not engendering trust, not being sufficiently commercial in their mindset, not focusing on the problem that needs resolving, and maybe being agile enough to bring speedy resolution, whether it's focusing on the right activities, having that broader commercial agenda, not understanding how the business makes money, simply put, and implementing best practice for HR in isolation to any consideration for commercial strategy, and that talking in HR jargon. Yep. Or dealing with the symptoms, but not the core issues. Interesting. Thanks very much for that feedback there. And that certainly resonates with what we've heard. And again, and what we're focusing on addressing in our program. So let's have a look and see how golden rule number 2 speaks to making sure this commercial credibility is rock solid. Tony.
Indeed, thanks. So golden rule number 2 is position yourself as a business leader as well as the people and organization expert. And remember, you're adding value to the business as well as building your career and your reputation along the way. The key point for me here is to ensure that your contribution is situationally specific and appropriate, and at the same time, ensuring that you are on message. Now, actually, this week, there has been a raft of difficult news, economically, politically, and commercially for many businesses, as we think about where we are in the economic cycle. And in reality, your contribution needs to be situationally appropriate to this particular moment. So, is your business looking forward, anticipating growth or contraction? It may well have been different from 2 or 3 months ago, by the time that all of these energy costs are coming through. Any consumer-facing business is likely to be going into a different part of this economic cycle. And where you are is going to result in which capabilities are going to be key to taking you through your business into the sunshine and these fields. Now, the capabilities could well be expressed differently. From a people and organization perspective, you may have one set, but commercially, your business may actually be needing to focus in other priorities. So if in this particular example, as you see, the people and organization priorities that you may have laid out for your business may well focused on leadership and talent, and ensuring that there is sufficient strategic clarity and that employees collaborate and work effectively towards those strategic objectives. But your CEO and your executive colleagues might actually be saying that this is going to be a really difficult time for the business, and they need ruthless focus on efficiency, on cost control, and on making sure that customers really are kept delighted at the moment. And in reality, that's taking the strategic clarity into what is the here and now, right now, which is going to make a difference. And with the economic turbulence, not knowing exactly how deep the cycle has become, the agility to be able to move very quickly and respond to the different economic conditions might mean that agility actually forms one of the key priorities that we need to be thinking about. And this actually, by the time we've got efficiency, customer service, and agility, that is the definition of talent. Those managers, those leaders who are able to manage in that particular way. And the final area, there might well be collaboration, might be something that we can all agree is going to be an absolutely must-have capability to get us through this part of the cycle and ensure that the business comes out of any sort of difficulty stronger and fitter and more aligned. And so the true commercial leader is going to be finding ways to ensure that the business priorities actually are aligned, and that anything which is in your people and organization agenda actually fits in with the business agenda at this particular point in the cycle. So that is rule 2. David, let's move on to rule 3 now.
Rule 3, so demonstrating your commercial value by using data strategically. Let's kick this one off with some research that the organization DI did a couple of years ago. They interviewed 25,000 CEOs and 2,500 HR directors. And what they were aiming to do was to strip down the essential roles that they believe the HR director plays. And they defined these 3 roles as following: partners, reactors, anticipators. So partners, as it says there, working towards mutual goals with line managers, sharing information with the business about talent gaps, and providing HR solutions. Reactors, setting and ensuring compliance with policies, responding to business needs, and installing basic initiatives to manage talent. And then there are the anticipators, using analytics to forecast talent needs, provide insights and solutions to ensure a high quality supply of talent, and link talent planning to business planning. So let's hope that those 3 roles are well defined, clearly defined for you. And we'll come up with our final poll. Denise, if I can ask you to put that one up. Based on those definitions there, which role do you feel most comfortable with yourself? So based on those definitions, which of those roles do you feel most comfortable with personally as an HR operative? Interesting early responses. And what's also interesting is this very much coincides with other times that we run this poll. So there's a real great consistency with the self-perception. Okay, just 20 more seconds. We've got a few more people to participate. So let's see, we've got one role in the clear lead at the moment, which certainly backs up our previous experience, our previous observations. Just another 10 seconds then. And okay. And we'll end the poll there. And I'll share the results. There you go. So hopefully everybody can see that. We've got 75% of you saying you feel most comfortable with the partner role, 10% as the reactor, and 15% as the anticipator. And this pretty much bears witness to other events we've done, but also a LinkedIn poll that we did on this. So interesting consistency. Let's now go into what the research actually found out. Okay, so when the HRDs were interviewed, this was their self-perception. 62% saw themselves mostly as a partner, 21% mostly as a reactor, 17% as an anticipator. That was the HRD perception. This is what Tony and I found the most interesting, though, when you map onto it what the CEOs thought. And as you can see there, the major discrepancy is in that reactor line. Double the amount of CEOs perceived their HRD as a reactor than the HRDs did themselves. So there's a perception gap here. And I think even more importantly, 72% of CEOs said actually that in the main, they want their HRD to be an anticipator. So that seems to be the gold standard. And certainly when we've talked to CEOs and other business leads, they've concurred with this, that they've said of those three roles, and that is absolutely the most useful, the most vital to themselves and the business, instilling that commercial credibility. So how do you become more of an anticipator? Tony, your thoughts?
Okay, my thoughts on why being an anticipator and mastering the use of data is really at the heart of impact and commercial credibility for HR leaders, because mastering the use of data supports your personal arguments to ensure that you've got evidence-backed arguments, and it builds management and HR competence. So my thought, to answer David's question on how we can get to the 72% level of anticipator that the CEOs are asking us for, is to think about the data and ensure that we start to be more evidence-led and fact-based. Now, it's not easy. No team that I've worked in, frankly, was ever happy with its level of HR information systems. If we had time, we'd do a poll, but I think I can pretty much guess and estimate what the level of satisfaction with your existing HR information systems is. But my counter to that is to say, whatever the quality of your systems, I challenge you that it's possible to, for example, get information, good level of historical information on leavers out of your payroll system, not from your HRS, but from your payroll system. And once you have that leaver information, it's pretty straightforward to analyze it and draw insights which will help to improve your future hiring and retention. For example, once you have your lists of leavers over, let's say over the last 12 months, then how many of them had left within 1 year of being hired? Then how many of them had left within 1 to 3 years? And how many were actually 3 years plus? And if you're then able to go back and analyze over the last 3 years, how has this changed? Because as we know, different groups leave for very different reasons. So just to say employees are leaving is not anticipatory. It's a question of looking and saying, those who've left under 1 year, that was undoubtedly due to either a bad recruitment or a bad onboarding experience. And that has been extremely costly. The 3 year plus at the other side are going to be leaving for very different reasons. And then you might well be start to look at the age profile of leavers, gender profile, and as we know, line managers. And to actually get the data around line managers and who are leaking employees most is going to be compelling evidence to actually ensure that you are seen as being that anticipator. So that we're out of time with regard to this golden rule, but let me just say that if a thought on the use of data and analytics in order to become more of an anticipator, then we've written a short ebook on this subject, which you can download from our website. You can see the link right here on the www.ceowhispering.co.uk site, and our ebook gives more guidance on the basics of approaching data and analytics to establish your credibility with your commercial peers. If you've got any questions, then do drop me a line to my personal email, tony@ceowhispering.co.uk, and I'll be happy to take the discussion forward. Over to David.
Perfect, and they're both in chat. So Tony's email address is in chat, and also our ceowhispering.co.uk website address is in chat. I should also say he was very kind to include me in that we wrote this book. I have to be really honest with you, he's a genius at this, all his own work. So in conclusion, let's just tell you a bit about our program. And really, in terms of outcomes, it was about elevating your standing with a CEO and executive team, making sure that those executive relationships are rock solid to give you the confidence and credibility to make the impact that you desire and get that greater support for your agenda and your priorities. We've also found out through the process of running it that actually a key benefit was getting ongoing support from a new HRD peer community. We understand how lonely it is in your role. So that was another byproduct of the program. As we said at the start, the next program starts on the 27th of April. It's all online. It's 4 times 3-hour modules. We spread it over 4 months, so it's once a month, and it's £2,500 program fee. You can book now. Either email us on hello@ceowhispering.co.uk, or better still, use Tony's personal email address, and then you'll get straight through to us. But I don't want to tell you too much about the program itself. It's actually much better that you hear from somebody who's actually gone through the program. So we're delighted to have Dan Ellis from ACAS. Dan is an alumnus of our program. I'm very much hoping he's still there and the gremlins haven't taken him out. He is still there. That's wonderful. So rather than me say anything, I'll pass over to Dan to tell you his experience, what he thought the benefits of the program and what it's enabled him to achieve. Dan, thanks very much for being here today. Over to you.
Lovely, thanks David. Good afternoon everybody. Yeah, so I went through the program not long ago, completed not long ago, and David asked me just to put a few quick thoughts together with regards to the first sort of thinking about what I wanted to achieve before I started on the program, the second being what value I got from it, and then the third being about the practical applications within my role and how it's made me more effective. Sitting down and thinking about why I wanted to go on it in the first place. When I started with ACAS a few years ago, it was my first director role, first board role. So really part of it was around the commercial awareness and becoming a trusted commercial partner, particularly for the chief exec, but also for my board colleagues. So part of it was around that peer-to-peer piece as well, particularly in terms of influencing sometimes difficult long-standing directors when you're a brand new one and it's your first go at the role. So there's parts of it that I sort of focused on the commercial awareness, acting as a trusted advisor, and then building credibility with peers. Those are my sort of 3 things moving into the program. I think as with all these things, you sort of go in with an idea about what you want to achieve, and then you come out with something totally different. And that's kind of what happened to me. But I think the sort of value for the program was what David was just touching on there, which was a community of like-minded people and a bit of a free space for me to sort of voice some of my concerns in terms of what I was struggling with in a forum that I knew was going to be confidential, but also outside of my organization. As David mentions, as I'm sure most of you are aware, HR can be a lonely place sometimes. You know, who do you go to complain to? It's particularly when you're the top of the tree in the people space. So it was being able to sort of discuss some of the more challenging issues that I'm going through in my organization, and how I'm struggling with those, particularly with a very heavily unionized organization, and that was really useful. And I think the sort of set up around the sort of using coaching aspects and coaching language, as well as sort of one-to-one action sets, were really useful. I think in terms of making me more effective, what I've come out with is probably a better idea about balance, and I think that is the key thing for me in terms of my takeaway from it, is knowing when to be a board member and driving forward the organization, and knowing when to be the people leader and putting the challenges in from that space. And that's been a real sort of key thing that I've taken away in terms of providing that balance for me as an individual, knowing which hat I'm wearing, but also in terms of the board in particular, knowing whether they're getting support or challenge and what they can expect when we're sort of entering into conversations like that. So that was a really nice piece to take away from it.
That's fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that. So just in closing, I think we've got about another 10 minutes. So if there's any Q&As, I think we've got some space for that. So if you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat function, and we'll be delighted to answer them in the last 10 minutes we've got. You can see also I've put in Tony's email address. We've also got our LinkedIn. We'd love you to contact and connect with us on LinkedIn. So please do feel free to do that. But yeah, any questions, thoughts, challenges even, based on the material we've presented to you today, would be very welcome at this point. So let's see what we've got in the chat function coming up.
Good. Just while we're waiting there, David and Tony, a couple of questions from me. One would be, are you seeing in the HR directors that you're meeting any aspirations to become chief executive? It's a path that relatively few HR directors have taken. But do you think there's a growing aspiration to have the #1 job in organizations?
Well, it's an interesting question, you know, and there are certainly those rare individuals out there who might, you know, have aspirations that way. You know, I have to say, you know, from my personal situation of having been a general manager and running, you know, a business, you know, there is the pressure that the chief executive is under, you know, is phenomenal. And what I took from that was how they really do need their team to step up and be that support. So my personal view, having done that, was that I could be most effective in providing the support to the chief executive and to the leadership team and do a great job. And the reason I mention that is that there's a former colleague of mine, Ron Shallikins, who is now the chief HR officer at PepsiCo. And he was asked that question. And Ron is one of the really, he was at Vodafone for quite a long time, probably for 8 years or so, and then moved to Pepsi probably 2 years ago. And he said, you know, when it comes to managing through the cycle, and as I was wanting to mention about what is situational, you know, the depth of experience that you need to provide that level of leadership. If you've spent your time in HR, Ronald said, you know, I haven't got that depth of experience. I have got that depth of experience to manage the people and organization aspects, but not the broader piece. So I should be a great HR director first, business leader, but not the #1.
Oh, good point. And just to follow up on that, I mean, if you're advising people maybe at an earlier stage of their career or aspiring HR directors, would you advise them to spend time in other functions rather than just be a pure HR career person?
Personally, yes, I think that the experience of particularly managing a team, and not necessarily just an HR team, but managing a team with different priorities and the different mindsets, and learning the difficulties of people management is invaluable experience. But having said that, I've worked with many great HR people who have never actually worked outside of HR. And I think I don't to the best of my knowledge, my poster boy that I just mentioned, Ronald Shellikens, I don't believe Ronald's ever worked outside, and that hasn't held him back. So I don't think it's essential, but I think it does, certainly give you respect for the fact that whilst we see our priorities in terms of great leadership, great people management, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Craig, sometimes it's not quite as easy as we would like it to be.
That's very true. I see Kay's put in the chat that the ex-CHRO of Unilever has become the CEO of Chanel, so that was that was a good move. And Louisa made a good point in the chat about the pandemic. So my question would be, has that been an opportunity for HR directors to shine? Has it thrown the light on people? And have you seen many CHROs, HR directors taking a leading role in COVID response?
Well, why don't Dan's on the line, so let's Dan, I'm going to put you on the spot here. How have you found that your role has changed during the nature of the pandemic, both from a positive and perhaps from a more challenging point?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, from my perspective, it's become a lot more pressurized. People looking to you more for a response and a solution rather than just a suggestion and some advice. I think to sort of probably sum it up, for me, I think I've operated more like a COO through the pandemic than an HR director, if I'm honest, and which has been great. I've really enjoyed that. But I think that comes with a different type of pressure. You're no longer the sort of back office person on the board. You become a really prominent person on the board because you're sort of dealing on a day-to-day basis with changes in government policy and how that makes an impact in your business. You're dealing with financial implications and what that means for your workforce. So you're just involved with everything so much more prominently, which I think has been great in terms of the positioning of HR and the importance in the business. But it's also been tough to deal with as an individual, adapting from one level to another at another.
And the other thing in your situation, Dan, is that you've got a chairman who's been appointed of ACAS, Claire Chapman, who many will know was at Tesco. I worked with her at Pepsi, and then in the NHS as well. And from that side, British Telecom as well, I think Claire was at. So she certainly will have raised the level of expectation and focus on HR, and that as you say, you're in the spotlight, and expectations have suddenly got slightly greater, I would imagine, with Claire being around.
Indeed, and pace is a key thing for sure.
I just think there's a couple of things interesting, and I'm just noticing what people have put in the chat about how many HRDs are on their CEO succession plan. Should we need to coach the CEOs in just how useful we can be to the success of the business on the basis that the CEOs can't require what they haven't seen before? And I think also, why should HRDs aspire to be the CEO? And I think there's two answers to that. I think firstly, being the people and organizational expert in a time where purpose-led businesses are absolutely at the forefront of what a 21st century organization should aspire to be, I think gives the HRD a really valuable opportunity to aspire to that top role if they add the commercial aspect to it. So I think that's one thing. But I think it's also understanding the nature of leadership. And the management theorist Richard Heitner has got a great idea about what he calls A leaders and C leaders. The A leaders who are accountable, and the C leaders who are the consults or the conciliaries. And that actually those C-type leaders create just as much value to the organization as the A-type leader, but it requires a different skill set, and perhaps there's a different pathway, and that actually maybe HRDs don't need to aspire to be the A leader, but certainly if they are the predominant C leader, that's perhaps how they can best add value to the organization. But if they have the aspiration to be the A leader, with the addition of this commercial awareness, commercial credibility, building the idea of, taking these commercial roles, the country MD roles, as Tony was talking about, why not? I think this is the time for the HRD. This is a really great opportunity.
Very good. One other question I had was about what's the typical career path that HR directors take to get to the top? Do they go through generalists, specialists, consultancies? Is there a trend emerging? And a lot more young people now doing degrees in HR. I mean, certainly compared to when I was a lad, no one did a degree in HR, whereas it seems to be a very popular degree these days. So is there a route to the top? Do you give advice on typical career paths?
Yeah, I've seen it move. A few years ago, certainly in publicly quoted businesses, there was such a focus on reward, and the board was so focused on reward that you almost needed to have punched your reward and Remco experience to be there. My sense over the last couple of years is that whilst reward and managing the Remco is still very important, that other areas have reached the top, and frankly, the business partnering operational side, and managing the complexities of the agenda and managing stakeholders, which coming back are some of the areas that we really aim to address. I'm seeing that impact, commercial influence are those required prerequisites. And I've been discussing in the last few months with a number of the leading HR headhunters who have consistently said to me, it's about ensuring that whoever we present as candidates to for an open position, a chief HR officer position, have got that credibility, right? We almost expect them to be able to do the functional side. Mm-hmm. That's a given. But are they going to be able to earn their credibility, earn their spurs at the top table? And so the reaction that we've had from the search community has been very, very positive to this program.
Very good.
I think with the addition as well as coaching skills, the ability to coach at that top executive layer is essential.
Great. I'm just looking through the chat. I think we probably responded to most of the questions. We're approaching the end of the session. Are there anything you want to say in closing?
Just simply, thanks very much for the opportunity. It's been great to present. I said I'll put again our LinkedIn information. So we'd love people to connect. Obviously, we're focusing our LinkedIn company page on being a place of value for HRD. So blogs, other insights, also what we call the expert view. These are video clips of interviews that we've done with other senior executives in HR, chief HR officers in Fortune 50 companies, et cetera, So they're regularly coming through the company page. So if people want to join up and also connect with us personally, that would be fantastic.
And I would just like to thank Denise and Craig, and actually particularly Dan, because it's been wonderful accompanying you along the journey and I never thought that I would be helping in a small way to move ACAS along its transformation. I always thought it was more likely to be the other way around, Dan, to be perfectly honest. And that's been a real pleasure. And thank you so much for coming on to share your experience with me. Completely
echo that. Thank you, Dan.
No problem.
And thank you, Craig.
Very good. And thanks to all of you. So thank you, David, Tony, and Dan. Great, insightful session. Enjoyed the conversation. And I'm sure you'll be happy for people to follow up with you directly. The recording of this event will be available on our website very shortly, so watch out for that. And just in closing, say our next webinar is on the afternoon of April 28th on the subject of developing the agile mindset, and we'll focus on how agile concepts can be incorporated into our leadership frameworks across organizations. The session will be run by leading business psychologists OE Cam, and we're also joined by the transformation director from BMJ, the British Medical Journal. Full details are on our website. I hope you can join us for that session. As I mentioned also, we are going to be restarting live events from May the 25th. So watch this space. We've got the Chief Executive of Wagamama, who happens to be an ex-HR director. So we managed to find one. Really looking forward to having a glass of wine with you on that occasion. Until then, bye for now, and thank you for joining. Cheerio.
Thanks
Bye
very
now.
much.